Mastermind by Maria Konnikova. How does Detective Sherlock Holmes consistently crack the toughest cases? Is his extraordinary intellect purely fictional, or is it possible to emulate his way of thinking to enhance your critical thinking and problem-solving skills? In Mastermind, psychologist and journalist Maria Konnikova demystifies Holmes's legendary intellect. She argues that with self-awareness and practice, you can cultivate his cognitive abilities to improve your memory, sharpen your observation skills, and think more rationally. Konnikova breaks down Holmes's approach to cracking a case into 4 steps. Maintain an efficient memory archive. Holmes meticulously organizes his extensive knowledge base, constantly updating it with new and relevant information. This maximizes his ability to recall relevant knowledge and draw connections between seemingly disparate pieces of information. Observe the evidence. Holmes applies objective observation techniques to note every detail about the case, uncovering both obvious and subtle clues. Imagine plausible scenarios. Drawing upon both his existing knowledge base and his observations about the case, Holmes imagines multiple scenarios that might explain the mystery. Make a logical deduction. Holmes critically assesses the validity of each scenario, eliminating those that don't align with the evidence until only the most logically consistent explanation emerges. Short-form note. Several authors have dissected Holmes's investigative method. While they all acknowledge these 4 steps in their analysis, they each emphasize different stages of Holmes's process. For example, Stuart Ross, The Science of Sherlock Holmes, highlights the intricacy of Holmes's objective evidence gathering, suggesting that he moves beyond simply documenting facts to include a rich, interpretive understanding of the case's backdrop. Meanwhile, James O'Brien, The Scientific Sherlock Holmes, stresses the concrete, empirical roots of Holmes's logical deductions, implying that Holmes's conclusions, while indicative of brilliant reasoning, are also firmly anchored in the precise field of forensic science. Konnikova suggests that Holmes can effectively follow these steps because, unlike most people, he's trained himself to think consciously by default. She explains that your brain comprises 2 modes of thought, autopilot and conscious. Autopilot. This is the default, energy-saving mode that people tend to rely on. It functions rapidly and instinctually, using shortcuts to process information. Because this mode of thinking requires minimal conscious effort, it often leads to inaccurate judgments. Conscious. This is the mode of thinking Holmes has trained himself to use all of the time. It functions more slowly than autopilot mode, enabling you to actively evaluate information, form accurate judgments, and solve complex problems. Despite its many benefits, people tend to avoid using this mode because it requires mental effort. Konnikova argues that the key to thinking more like Holmes is to adopt conscious thinking as your default mode. Short-form note. Malcolm Gladwell, Blink, offers a contrasting perspective, arguing that autopilot mode isn't a mental drawback but an essential tool for efficiently managing mental resources and decision-making. He warns that constant conscious thinking can inhibit this natural mechanism, resulting in mental stagnation. Supporting his argument, he refers to people with damage to their ventromedial prefrontal cortex, a brain region responsible for unconscious thought. These people can't engage autopilot mode, which means they must always think consciously. However, instead of reaping the benefits Konnikova describes, they tend to overthink, become excessively rational, and struggle to make trivial decisions. In this guide, we'll walk you through Holmes's approach and explore how each step relates to your daily decisions and behaviors. We'll cover common cognitive errors that result from thinking on autopilot and strategies for overriding them and completing each step more consciously. We'll also supplement Konnikova's ideas with research and actionable methods from other psychologists and cognitive experts. Step number 1. Maintain an efficient memory archive. Holmes's insights into cases stem from his ability to accurately recall relevant information from his extensive knowledge base. Konnikova notes that Holmes achieves this by continually organizing his memories, consciously memorizing details that may aid his investigations. This ongoing memory curation provides him with a well-organized mental archive of relevant information, allowing him to effectively integrate and apply his knowledge to solve complex cases. In this section, We'll first explain how the autopilot mode of thinking hampers memory storage and recall. Then we'll explore how to consciously create new memories. Autopilot mode impedes memory storage and recall. Unlike Holmes, most people don't consciously manage their memories. Rather, they let their brains operate on autopilot, resulting in a disorganized memory archive that hampers their ability to retain and recall information. Konnikova explains that when you're in this mode, your brain automatically stores information based on what immediately appeals to you, whether it's personally interesting, emotionally stimulating, or novel. This indiscriminate accumulation leads to a chaotic memory archive where the things you want to remember get buried under heaps of trivia, making it difficult to recall information when you need it. Short-form note: Rolf Dobelli, The Art of Thinking Clearly, expands on Konnikova's description of a chaotic memory archive, suggesting that the memories you can recall are often inaccurate or unreliable. This happens because your brain rewrites your memories, changing details to match your evolving opinions and beliefs. As a result, you recall memories that align with and reinforce your current attitude but are often miles away from what actually happened. For example, you might have been indifferent to a certain political cause in the past. However, now that this cause aligns with your current political views, you might remember yourself as a passionate supporter from the onset. How to consciously create new memories. Konnikova suggests that you can emulate Holmes's memory management skills by taking conscious control of the information you commit to memory. She recommends 4 strategies for achieving this. Set clear goals, fuel your motivation, create associations, and engage your senses. Strategy 1. Set clear goals. Konnikova advises that you determine what information is relevant to your objectives and focus only on those details to avoid cluttering your memory archive with unnecessary data. For example, when studying for an exam, focus on the concepts likely to be tested rather than trying to memorize every single point in the textbook. Short-form note: Barbara Oakley and Terence Sinowski, Learning How to Learn, suggest a practical way to clarify your memorization goals. Skim to get an overview before going into specifics. For example, before reading a book, scan the headings, contents list, or index. This method provides 2 benefits. 1. It steers your attention toward key concepts, which allows you to pinpoint relevant details and avoid the clutter of non-essential information. 2. It helps you absorb the material better because it's easier to embed something in your memory, like the details of the book, if you relate it to something that's already there, the information you got from skimming. We'll cover this concept in more detail in Strategy 3. Strategy 2. Fuel your motivation. Consider what benefits remembering the information will provide. Konnikova says that being clear about the advantages will encourage you to engage more deeply with, and thus effectively memorize, the material. For example, if you need to remember names at a networking event, think about how each person could play a role in your professional development, thereby giving each name a personal stake in your memory. Short-form note: Many self-improvement practitioners add that imagining future benefits is key to achieving any goal, not just memorization. They explain that you need to feel emotionally invested in your goals to achieve them. The more benefits you anticipate from achieving your memorization goal, the more inspired and motivated you'll feel to achieve it. Therefore, when you write your list of benefits, try to make it as exciting and meaningful as possible. Strategy 3. Create associations. Link your existing knowledge with what you want to remember. According to Konnikova, this leverages your brain's tendency to organize and retrieve memories through networks of related concepts. When you associate new data with what you already know, you weave it into your brain's existing network of memories, thereby enhancing retrieval. For example, to remember a new acquaintance's name, associate it with a friend or celebrity who shares the same name. Short-form note: Oakley and Sinowski, Learning How to Learn, suggest that you can link your existing knowledge with what you want to remember by using acronyms or mnemonics to create metaphors. You can make your metaphors even more memorable if you make them humorous. For example, if your new acquaintance's name is Cat, you might create the humorous mnemonic, "Kangaroos adore tacos." This links what you already know, the funny phrase about kangaroos and tacos, with the new name you want to remember. Strategy 4. Engage your senses. Engage your senses when reviewing what you want to remember. For instance, by describing the information aloud or vividly imagining the details. Konnikova explains that multisensory stimulation forces you to process new information more thoroughly, leading to more effective retention and recall. For example, to engage your senses to remember a recipe, you might speak the steps out loud, visualize yourself performing each action, imagine the taste of the ingredients, the smell of the dish cooking, or gesture the movements as if you were cooking. Short-form note. Kevin Horsley, Unlimited Memory, adds that your sensory associations will be easier to remember if you first exaggerate them, by making them ridiculous or illogical, then animate or turn them into a narrative. For example, to remember the exact quantities of butter and sugar required in a recipe, you might imagine two overscaled blocks of butter and sugar playfully wrestling each other. The size of the blocks could correspond to their proportions in the recipe, turning a mundane measurement into an unforgettable spectacle. Step number 2. Observe the evidence. We've just covered how taking conscious control of what you commit to memory helps you accurately recall relevant information when needed. Now, let's move on to the second step of Holmes's process. Observe the evidence. Holmes's keen eye for detail enables him to notice subtle clues that escape the notice of others. Konnikova suggests that the key to Holmes's ability is his continual, mindful awareness of his mental processes and environment. His heightened awareness allows him to objectively take in all the evidence, ensuring that he doesn't overlook crucial details or allow irrelevant distractions to mislead him. This mindful approach is critical to his investigative success because his observations directly influence the information he retrieves from his memory, how he interprets the evidence, and his subsequent deductions. Likewise, Konnikova points out that your observations impact how you interpret and judge your environment, which in turn influences all your subsequent thoughts, decisions, and behaviors. We'll now explain how the autopilot mode of thinking interferes with accurate observation and how you can consciously control what you observe. Autopilot mode obstructs accurate observation. In contrast to Holmes's mindful approach, operating on autopilot predisposes you to cognitive shortcuts that prioritize quick, effortless perception at the expense of accuracy. Konnikova explains that these shortcuts essentially filter your perceptions, making it impossible to objectively observe your environment. This leads you to base all your subsequent thoughts, decisions, and behaviors on skewed or incomplete observations. According to Konnikova, several factors make you more susceptible to cognitive shortcuts and inaccurate observations. Distractions, priming, environmental conditions, your internal state, and biases. Let's explore these in detail. Factor 1. Distractions. Konnikova argues that distractions make it impossible to focus on or accurately observe anything. As a result, you overlook details in your environment. For example, while multitasking in a grocery store, talking on your phone and scanning the shelves, you might overlook a "caution" wet floor sign, resulting in a preventable accident. Short-form note, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, flow, suggests that you're more prone to distractions when you feel dissatisfied. He explains that when you don't value what you're experiencing, you find it difficult to focus your attention on the present moment. However, your mind wants to focus on something, so it seeks external stimulation to occupy your thoughts. Factor 2. Priming. Konnikova suggests that priming, where recent stimuli narrow your focus, compels you to notice details that align with those stimuli and ignore those that don't. For example, after seeing an advertisement for a specific car model, you start noticing that car model more frequently, while other models fade into the background. Short-form note, priming is a type of subconscious manipulation often used in marketing and sales. For example, restaurants prime customers to want Italian wine by playing Italian music in the background. Customers don't consciously think they want Italian wine to go with the music, but they notice that part of the menu because of it. However, after several studies failed to replicate earlier findings about the impact of priming, some psychologists believe that its effects on perception are more limited than previously thought. Factor 3. Environmental conditions. According to Konnikova, environmental conditions influence what you notice. For example, A gloomy day might dim your perception of your surroundings, causing you to miss the vibrant colors of a street mural that would usually catch your eye on a sunnier day. Factor 4. Your internal state. Konnikova explains that internal factors such as your mood or physical state skew your perception of events. For example, when you feel positive and energetic, you're more likely to pick up on useful information in a work meeting. On the other hand, when you feel tired or unwell, you're more likely to perceive that same meeting as banal and fail to note valuable insights. Short-form note. While Konnikova distinguishes between environmental and internal factors, Brianna Wiest, 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think, argues that internal factors directly influence how you interpret and perceive your environment. For example, if you're feeling upbeat, you might interpret whether that others perceive as gloomy as pleasantly cool and refreshing, and this positive interpretation might direct your attention to the vibrant colors of the street mural. Factor 5. Biases. According to Konnikova, biases stemming from entrenched stereotypes and past experiences lead you to only observe details that fit your preconceived notions and ignore any evidence that doesn't fit. For example, if you believe that bankers are corrupt, you might only notice financial scandals and disregard reports of bankers working ethically. Short-form note. Jennifer Eberhardt, Biased, explains that biases are the product of your natural impulse to divide all your thoughts, feelings, and experiences into categories. You unconsciously rely on these categories to make sense of the world. Instead of observing every detail about a person or situation, you make assumptions about them based on their category, and these assumptions define what you notice. How to consciously control what you observe. Konnikova suggests that you can overcome the influence of cognitive shortcuts and make more accurate observations by adopting a three-part strategy. Define your purpose, engage all your senses, and recognize and challenge cognitive shortcuts. Strategy 1. Define your purpose. Begin by clearly defining the purpose of your observation. Konnikova explains that this intentional focus instructs your brain to consciously filter stimuli based on your objectives. This makes it easier for you to notice what's relevant and ignore what's not. For example, you define improving customer satisfaction as the purpose of your observation and choose to zero in on customer interactions and feedback mechanisms. Short-form note. The authors of Critical Thinking, Logic, and Problem-Solving suggest that you can define your purpose by identifying questions that need answering. They add that using neutral language to form questions can help you to objectively view all available information. For example, asking, "Why are our customers dissatisfied?" might focus your attention only on instances of poor service. On the other hand, asking a neutral question such as, "What factors influence customer retention?" may help you notice all aspects of customer interaction, giving you a comprehensive overview of the situation. Strategy 2. Engage all your senses. With your purpose in mind, bring all of your senses into play to observe your environment. Konnikova says that a multisensory approach enables you to consciously capture nuances and details that you might otherwise overlook. For example, the purpose of your observation is to gauge your child's mood. Instead of just asking them how their day was and listening to their verbal response, observe their body language and energy levels. Notice if they're tense or relaxed when you hug them, or pay attention to their energy levels and appetite during dinner. All these sensory inputs will provide a more complete picture of their emotional state than words alone could convey. Short-form note. John Medina, Brain Rules, affirms this method, suggesting that your brain absorbs information best when you engage more than one of your senses. Engaging multiple senses heightens your ability to perceive more of your environment in two ways. First, engaging one sense automatically activates other senses. For example, when you taste something, you might also smell it. Second, engaging multiple senses heightens your senses. For example, when you're trained to hear a doorbell while simultaneously seeing a flashing light, you're able to hear the doorbell at lower decibels. Strategy 3. Recognize and challenge cognitive shortcuts. Even with a clear purpose and active sensory engagement, cognitive shortcuts can still influence your observations. To counter this influence, Konnikova recommends the following methods. 1. Before making an observation, Pause and reflect on possible internal and environmental influences on your observations. This preemptive contemplation can help you anticipate and mitigate influences before they affect your perception. For example, before reviewing a report, consider any factors that might affect your attention to detail, such as your energy level or the lighting in your office. Short-form note: Darren Hardy, The Compound Effect, offers practical advice for acknowledging and addressing internal and environmental influences on your mindset. He identifies 3 types of influences: the stimuli your brain processes, the people you associate with, and your physical surroundings. While Hardy addresses these influences in terms of how they impact your happiness and productivity levels, you might find his suggestions useful for improving your observational skills. Pay attention to the media and ideas you consume, be intentional about the people you spend time with, and clear up physical and psychic clutter. 2. Use checklists to systematically guide your observations. According to Konnikova, this structured approach prevents autopilot from taking over and filtering critical details. For example, if you're shopping for a new refrigerator, use a checklist to ensure you don't overlook essential features like energy efficiency ratings, dimensions, noise levels, and warranty details. Short-form note: Atul Gawande, The Checklist Manifesto, provides additional advice for creating effective checklists. Keep them short and concise, by focusing only on the most essential items, and use simple, clear language that you can easily understand. 3. After making an observation, consider how preconceived notions may have influenced it. Konnikova says that this reflection ensures that your observations are based on facts rather than assumptions. For example, after conversing with a neighbor, reflect on whether your observations were colored by your previous experiences with them, rather than what was actually said in this conversation. Short-form note: Dan and Chip Heath, Decisive, offer a decision-making strategy that you can adapt to probe your assumptions. They argue that you can make more objective decisions by imagining what someone else would do. Applying this strategy in a different context, you might imagine what someone else would have observed. Asking yourself, if X was in this situation, what would they have noticed and why? Helps detach you from your preconceptions, providing space to reassess your initial assumptions more objectively. For example, ask yourself what someone with no prior history with your neighbor would have observed during the conversation. 4. Recount your observations as if explaining them to someone unfamiliar with the situation. Konnikova suggests that this practice can highlight overlooked details and provide a clearer, more objective view. For example, by describing a team meeting to a colleague who wasn't present, you might realize that you noticed contributions from more vocal members and overlooked valuable input from quieter team members. Short-form note: Alternatively, pretend you're gathering facts for someone unfamiliar with the situation before you start observing. According to Dale Carnegie, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, this preemptive strategy can help overcome the tendency to only seek out information that validates your assumptions, enabling you to see the situation from all sides. Step number 3. Imagine plausible scenarios. Now that we've discussed how to overcome the influence of cognitive shortcuts to make more accurate observations, let's explore the third step of Holmes's process: imagine plausible scenarios. Instead of jumping to conclusions, Holmes constructs a variety of potential narratives to explain the mystery. How is it that Holmes can conceive multiple possibilities while others on the case either struggle to move past their initial assumptions or fail to propose a single theory? According to Konnikova, he engages in creative thinking, using his imagination to synthesize his knowledge with the evidence he's observed and to explore patterns and connections between seemingly disparate clues. Konnikova argues that this imaginative process is vital to Holmes's investigative success and is also critical for effective decision-making and problem-solving in daily life. In this section, we'll explain how the autopilot mode of thinking inhibits creative problem-solving and how to more consciously engage your imagination. Autopilot mode compels you to jump to conclusions. Contrary to Holmes's imaginative and exploratory approach, operating on autopilot compels you to latch on to the first conclusion or solution that comes to mind. Konnikova explains that just as it predisposes you to cognitive shortcuts, autopilot streamlines your decision-making and problem-solving processes at the expense of thoroughness. This streamlining process nudges you to favor ideas that align with your preconceptions and expectations and to dismiss those that don't. As a result, you automatically settle for the most obvious or convenient answers and solutions, regardless of their accuracy or effectiveness. 3 fallacies compromise decision-making and problem-solving. Dan and Chip Heath, Decisive, add insight into how autopilot streamlines decision-making and problem-solving by identifying 3 fallacies that come into play. 1. Binary thinking. You tend to identify and consider only 2 options, which prevents you from evaluating multiple, potentially better options. For example, you're unhappy at work and assume you have only 2 options: quit or stay. 2. Confirmation bias. Once you've identified your options, you search for and favor information that underscores your inclinations, and you ignore information that supports your non-preferred option, even if that option is better. For example, because you're inclined to quit your job, you ignore evidence suggesting that staying might be the most practical choice for now, such as high unemployment rates or upcoming promotions at your current company. 3. Status quo bias. Your natural tendency to favor what's familiar causes you to resist conclusions that require changing your mind or behaviors. For example, even though you lean toward quitting, you resist entertaining alternatives like freelancing or entrepreneurship because they mark a significant shift from your routine employment. How to consciously engage your imagination to cultivate fresh ideas. Konnikova says that you can override the tendency to make quick decisions, cultivate Holmes's ability to think outside of the box, and open your mind to new possibilities by practicing 6 strategies. Challenge your initial assumptions, embrace new ideas and experiences, expand your knowledge, practice mindfulness, engage in constructive distractions, and change your environment. Strategy 1. Challenge your initial assumptions. Actively seek out contradictory information and perspectives. According to Konnikova, this deliberate search can expose flaws in your initial assumptions and point you toward viable alternatives. For example, if you're deciding how to reduce operational costs and your first instinct is to cut staff, investigate companies that have achieved cost savings in other ways. Short-form note: Nassim Nicholas Taleb, The Black Swan, adds that you can't be sure your assumptions are accurate unless you actively try to disprove them. Taleb uses the term negative empiricism to describe seeking out information that could disprove what you think, as opposed to the term empiricism, which describes gaining information solely from your observations. Strategy 2. Embrace new ideas and experiences. Konnikova highlights that exposing yourself to unfamiliar ideas and diversifying your experiences forces your brain to consider a wider range of possibilities, which curbs your tendency to settle for convenient answers. For example, if you're planning a vacation and automatically think of visiting a popular resort, researching less well-known destinations might lead you to a more adventurous and memorable holiday. New ideas and experiences help you adapt to different situations. Another advantage of embracing new ideas and experiences is that it helps you adapt to a variety of fields and situations. Dobelli, The Art of Thinking Clearly, explains that when you're experienced in one field, you naturally develop a rubric, a set of decision-making guidelines or problem-solving strategies based on this experience. This rubric is an asset when dealing with your field of expertise. However, you tend to apply this rubric when dealing with issues outside your field of expertise, too. This leads you to misinterpret situations or use your experience in unconstructive ways. For example, a lawyer might apply their rigorous analytical approach to a family argument, escalating the situation rather than resolving it. Dobelli suggests that you can overcome this tendency by compensating for areas in which you're less experienced. For example, the lawyer might learn about emotional intelligence or study conflict resolution techniques. Strategy 3. Expand your knowledge. Cultivate knowledge across different fields. Konnikova explains that the wider you're learning, the easier it is to identify patterns and relationships that are not immediately obvious. For example, your basic knowledge of economic theory may lead you to assume that the only way a business can get more customers is by lowering prices. However, by reading up on social psychology, you might realize that fostering a sense of community can be just as effective. Short-form note: Stephen Kotler, The Art of Impossible, suggests allocating at least 30 minutes a day to expand your knowledge. Absorbing new information every day feeds your brain a continual stream of information while giving it time to naturally make connections between what you already know and what you're learning. Meanwhile, Jim Quick, Limitless, says you're more likely to expand your knowledge by adopting this three-step process. 1. Before you start a learning session, ask yourself what you specifically intend to learn from it. 2. Keeping your goal in mind, filter the information and write down only what's relevant to that goal. 3. Once your session is complete, highlight the most valuable information and outline the key points. Strategy 4. Practice mindfulness. Konnikova suggests that mindfulness practices such as meditation enhance creative thinking by detaching your mind from the issue at hand, as well as from other distractions. This creates mental space to consider decisions or problems from a broader, more conceptual standpoint and allows you to explore ideas that might have been obscured by a narrow focus on details. For example, you've been grappling with a complex coding problem and feel stuck. After a mindfulness session, you return to the problem with a relaxed mind. This helps you realize that the issue isn't in the code itself but in the way users are interacting with it, prompting a redesign that resolves the issue and enhances user experience. Mindfulness improves working memory. Chris Bailey, Hyperfocus, elaborates on how mindfulness creates mental space. It improves your working memory. Bailey explains 3 key points about working memory. Whenever you focus on a task, it occupies part of your working memory, which holds information your mind is actively processing. The amount of working memory a task occupies depends on its complexity. The more complex a task, the more working memory it requires. Your working memory has a limited capacity in terms of how much information it can hold simultaneously. In other words, your working memory's capacity determines how much you can pay attention to at any one time. Bailey suggests that mindfulness increases your working memory capacity, enabling you to focus on more complex tasks. Additionally, it improves your ability to make efficient decisions, which increases your productivity. With a higher working memory capacity, you only need to use some of your working memory doing a task. This leaves you with spare working memory to think about that task and plan what you'll do next. Strategy 5. Engage in constructive distractions. Take a break from directly focusing on the issue by immersing yourself in an engaging yet undemanding activity. Konnikova notes that this kind of distraction enables your brain to process the problem or decision in the background. This allows your mind to make connections and access ideas that aren't readily available during intense, focused thought. For example, when putting together a jigsaw puzzle, an activity unrelated to the speech you're trying to write, you might recall a personal anecdote that perfectly illustrates your main point. How alternating between focused and diffuse modes fosters new ideas. Barbara Oakley and Olav Skew, Learn Like a Pro, clarify how constructive distractions foster new insights and ideas. They explain that your brain has 2 modes of attention, focused and diffuse. Focused mode is when you deliberately concentrate on a task in front of you. For example, reading or memorizing new information. This mode is best for strengthening your understanding of familiar topics or gaining new knowledge related to things you already know. This is due to 2 reasons. First, focused mode uses existing neural connections, established pathways in the brain that allow it to efficiently process and recall known information. Second, in this mode, your brain suppresses all thoughts except what you're purposefully paying attention to, which prevents you from making aha connections between different pieces of information. Diffuse mode is when you don't focus on any one thing in particular, but instead let thoughts flow through your mind naturally, like when you're putting together a jigsaw puzzle. When you're engaged in such activities, your brain works on problems and processes new information in the background by making novel connections, building new neural connections between ideas and knowledge that it cannot make while in focused mode. Oakley and Skew suggest that alternating between both modes optimizes your ability to generate and apply new insights and ideas. Focused mode helps you comprehend the task at hand. Taking a mental break in diffuse mode allows your brain to discover new insights, and switching back into focus mode allows you to apply those insights to the task. Strategy 6. Change your environment. Switch up the environment where you usually address the decision or problem you're facing, for instance, by relocating to a new room or going for a walk. Konnikova notes that new surroundings offer varied sensory experiences that nudge your brain to think differently. For example, if you're suffering from writer's block, moving from your usual workspace to a bustling cafe might surround you with a lively atmosphere, sparking a flow of fresh phrases and concepts that rejuvenate your writing. Short-form note. Barbara Oakley, A Mind for Numbers, clarifies how changing your environment helps you think differently. When you habitually address a task in the same place, your brain tends to make neural connections between that task and that place, meaning that your brain associates your thinking patterns for the task with that specific environment. However, when you work on the task in a different setting, your brain retrieves the information you need using slightly different neural pathways, allowing you to see that information from alternative perspectives. Step number 4. Make a logical deduction. We've just explained how to override the tendency to make snap judgments and open your mind to alternative possibilities. We'll now discuss Holmes's fourth and final step of the process. Make a logical deduction. Holmes critically evaluates each scenario against the evidence to deduce the most logical explanation. Konnikova argues that Holmes's consistent success in unraveling mysteries stems from his ability to engage in disciplined reasoning that is both sequential and exhaustive. This meticulous approach ensures that his final deduction is not just one of many plausible theories, but the only explanation that accounts for all of the evidence. Konnikova emphasizes that disciplined reasoning is just as critical for everyday decision-making and problem-solving because it safeguards against errors that can lead to poor judgment. Next, we'll explain how autopilot mode inhibits logical thinking and explore strategies to reach rational conclusions. Autopilot mode favors intuition over logic. Counter to Holmes's logical approach, when you operate in autopilot mode, you're more likely to favor intuition over analytical thinking because following your gut demands less cognitive effort than the rigorous process of logical reasoning. Konnikova explains that, in autopilot mode, your brain seeks to quickly make sense of new information by drawing parallels with past experiences or existing knowledge. The ease of making these connections can create a compelling sense of rightness. This feeling urges you to disregard evidence that doesn't conform to these pre-existing frameworks. As a result, you form conclusions that feel comfortable and reassuring due to their familiarity, rather than conclusions that are factually sound. For example, when house hunting, you gravitate toward a property similar to your childhood home despite it being smaller and pricier than other options. The logical approach would be to consider more cost-effective properties, but you quickly conclude that it's the best property for you because it feels familiar and right. Short-form note. One reason intuition can lead to inaccurate conclusions is its tendency to perceive patterns and connections between events, even when there are none. One example of this is gambler's fallacy, the belief that incidental patterns that happened in the past will hold true in the future. For example, when playing roulette, gambler's fallacy might cause you to believe that the ball is more likely to land on red if it's landed on black multiple times in a row. How to consciously formulate logical conclusions. According to Konnikova, you can formulate more logical conclusions and overcome the tendency to rely on intuition by adopting a three-part strategy. Weigh all evidence equally, follow a logical sequence, and review and revise. Let's explore how you can apply these strategies to assess the viability of each potential conclusion. Your results from step number 3, imagining plausible scenarios. Strategy 1. Weigh all information equally. Approach all information with impartiality, assigning equal weight to evidence that supports or challenges your theory. Konnikova suggests that consciously giving equal consideration to all available data counteracts your natural inclination to seek out and prioritize information that confirms your initial assumptions. As discussed in step number 2, observe the evidence. For example, if you assume that an investment will pay off, analyze both its potential growth based on past performance and factors that may challenge your assumption, such as market volatility and economic forecasts. Short-form note. In contrast, the authors of Critical Thinking, Logic and Problem-Solving suggest that giving equal consideration to all information may waste your time and energy. This is because not all information is equally useful, relevant, or reliable. For example, when assessing a potential investment, you note speculations of skyrocketing returns. This information is irrelevant and unreliable because it's based on unproven predictions rather than solid market trends. Therefore, for each piece of information you gather, the authors recommend questioning its relevance to your decision or problem and ensuring it originates from an accurate source. Strategy 2. Follow a logical sequence. Analyze the information systematically, ensuring that each inference logically follows from the one before it. Konnikova explains that this step-by-step approach helps you clarify the connections between different pieces of information. Additionally, it ensures a clear line of reasoning, where each inference lays the groundwork for the next, leading to a well-reasoned conclusion that's factually grounded. For example, to understand why a marketing campaign failed, begin with the initial market research to see if the target demographic was identified correctly. Then, move on to the strategy developed from that research, checking if it aligned with the research insights. Next, evaluate the execution of the campaign to ensure it was carried out as planned. Finally, analyze the campaign results against the expected outcomes. This sequential analysis ensures a logical connection between each phase and helps pinpoint where the plan may have gone awry. Short-form note: while following a logical progression can help you establish a clear line of reasoning, Rhiannon Beaubien and Rosie Leesrewis, The Great Mental Models Volume 3, suggest that most of what happens does so by chance. In other words, not all outcomes can be tied into neat cause and effect relationships. For example, when reviewing information about your marketing campaign in sequence, you conclude that it failed because you didn't identify the correct target demographic. However, the actual cause of the failure was an unexpected trend shift after you identified your target demographic. This random event upsets your sequential analysis, leading you to draw an inaccurate conclusion. Strategy 3. Review and revise. Continuously evaluate and adjust your conclusions in light of new data or perspectives. Konnikova emphasizes that a logical deduction is not a one-time event but an ongoing process that should evolve as and when new information emerges. This active revision helps eliminate outdated information, ensuring your conclusions align with the latest relevant facts. For example, you've concluded that your business strategy should focus on product innovation to outpace competitors. If new information reveals a market shift toward customer experience enhancements, revisiting and revising your conclusion will ensure a more competitive strategy. Short-form note: Dan and Chip Heath, Decisive, suggest a practical way to keep track of and evaluate relevant information. After you form a conclusion, list possible warning signs that the conclusion is inaccurate or headed toward a negative outcome. If you notice a pattern of more than one warning sign, it's a signal that you need to re-evaluate your conclusion. For example, after concluding that your business strategy should focus on product innovation, you might list possible warning signs such as low customer feedback ratings or decreasing sales. If these appear, you'll know it's time to seek out information and reassess your strategy.